Welcome to the Autosportradio.com 2023 show. I'm your host, Don Kay, and we are coming to you from the Green Street Pub and Eatery at 911 North Green Street in Brownsburg. Tonight we're brought to you by the Indy Dental Group. If you need dental work, trust me, it's the place to go. They have 5 offices, so somewhere they'll find an office for you. So call, make an appointment. You can reach them at 317-846-6125. VP Insurance, the answer you need for insurance needs no matter what they are. Call Tom or Mike at 317-248-0070 for VP Insurance. They're located about 1 mile west of the Speedway on 16th Street. They can help you and they get good prices. It's amazing. We're also brought to you by SVRA. If you're into Trans Am racing, it's back bigger than ever. They have that. They have the vintage cars, Indy cars. They have sports cars. They have great programs. You can go to their website, svra.com, check the schedule. If there's anything going on anywhere near you, stop by. You'll be glad you did. That's the svra.com. Check out the schedule. We're happy that you're joining us, and of course today was to be opening day at the Speedway, but Mother Nature said not so fast. So hopefully tomorrow will be the day to go. However, oh boy, this big star, the big star of the show, interrupting everything as usual. I have a guest that a lot of people have said, and who might that be? Well, we're going to find out real quick. He is the owner of Cusick Motorsports with his wife. They are from Thermal, California. If you remember, there was a test done out there, and I just put 2 and 2 together and said, aha, that's how that happened. He has a driver that we've all known, I'm sure, Stefan Wilson, and he's been involved in the series for a couple of years and looking forward to going full time. He's got an interesting story to tell, and I want you to welcome Mr. Don Cusick.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Now, obviously, when you were a kid, you didn't own cars, you didn't race cars, what got you into motorsports?
So I actually did. I raced quarter midgets and then modified midgets when I was a kid. But what really got me into it was my dad took me to the local drag strip, and that was in the days of Don Garlitz, Tony Nancy. You remember all those guys.
Oh yeah.
So we did that, and then we used to go to the closed circuit television of the Indy 500 broadcasts way back in the day. I think 1965 was the first one I went to.
Yep.
When they were still running the front engine roadsters. And then, of course, that all changed. One year there was 32 roadsters and 1 rear engine car, and the next year there was the exact opposite. So I just, I became a fan.
You also told me that besides being an outstanding golfer, your wife is a motorsports fan and likes to drive.
She is an outstanding golfer, and yeah, she's loving it. We wouldn't be here without her.
Well, you have a couple kids, and they certainly wouldn't be here without her either.
Good point.
Now, you recently sold your business that you had for 42 years, and you were in the medical manufacturing of apparel, I believe.
Yeah, radiation protection apparel. So when you go to the dentist and they put that big, heavy thing on you, that and then more. We kind of specialize in cardiology.
Well, that's nice because I see a cardiologist and I want him to take care of me, not burn me up.
He's protecting himself, though, not you, just so
course.
You know. Yeah.
So for 42 years, from what I read, you were one of the top in the country.
We, like anything, we started small and it just kind of grew and evolved over the years. And when we sold the company 3 years ago, April of 2020, we were distributed in 57 different countries.
Is that all, 57?
Just 57.
Oh, jeez. If you stuck around a little longer, you could have got to 60.
Well, just enough to pay for an Indy car. That was the important thing.
Oh, boy. Your idea is, within the next year or two, I would assume, is you want to go full-time.
We do want to go full-time. We're actually working on something very promising right now. So maybe we'll have some good news to share at the end of the month.
Really? How did you stumble upon, and I use that term literally, not literally, Stefan Wilson?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So when we sold the company, my wife knew I was a big race fan, and so she said, first thing we're going to do when you sell the company is we're going to go to the Thermal Club, we're going to buy a house, we're going to join, and you can go racing. So I said, no. I said, absolutely. So we went out there, we did that. I was looking for something different, a different kind of track car. Everybody kind of had the same stuff. And I ran across Generation 6 NASCARs that Hendrick Motorsports was rebuilding and turning into track cars. So I bought serial number 003, which was the first one out at Thermal, and of course it attracted a lot of attention because they were all in the German sports cars and we were running an American muscle car. Anyway, driving instructor that knew Stefan saw it and asked if Stefan could come out and get some seat time in it, and I said, yeah, sure. Didn't know who he was, but he said he was an IndyCar driver, and immediately I said, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. So Stefan came out and got in the car. I'm still not certain how he fit in there. I don't know if you guys know, he's 6'4". So watching him climb through the window of that car was actually pretty amusing. Almost as amusing as when I try to crawl through the window of that car. But I'd never been to the 500. I'd never been to Indy, and I always wanted to go. And I asked him if he could, if he knew anybody that could get us in there and give us a first-class experience. And he made that happen. And I invited him. Said, "Do you want to go with us to watch the race?" And he said, "Nah. Once you've driven there, you don't really want to just be a spectator until you retire." So I made the huge mistake of saying, "Well, how do we get into the race?" And I'll be damned if he didn't figure out how to do that. And 2 months later, I guess, we were running with Andretti as a 6th car.
It's amazing what happens if you push. Now, I've been reading up about you and what you're doing, and I found you're not a guy that just goes out to a company and say, "How would you like to sponsor me?" What do we do? Well, we race Indy cars, and you see your name on television. You've got a completely different approach, which I think is absolutely the way it should go. Tell me about your approach of sponsorship.
Sure, yeah. Well, Don, like you said, when you go out to a company and say, "Hey, you want your name on the side of a car, we're racing Indy cars," you can probably pretty much guess what the answer to that is right away. So we decided that we were going to do it a little bit differently, and we were going to try to put businesses together that made sense, entertain them at the Speedway, let them get to know one another, and do some business together. And it worked out really, really well. One of Stefan's friends and a sponsor of ours now for the last 3 years is Sierra Pacific Lumber. And so it made sense to us that we should probably go and talk to some builders because we could put them together, they could buy the lumber, and it's a win-win for everybody. So now we've got 3 home builders and Sierra Pacific Windows with us, and 20 other of our sponsors as well. The car's actually a traveling billboard, but it's all related somehow. So there's opportunities for people to meet each other and grow their businesses and help each other. And so we built a little bit of a community. We've got 60 people coming out on Thursday of race weekend for all 4 days. So we're excited about it.
Well, that's clever. And speaking of what you're doing, we have in the house tonight the former vice president of marketing for the Indy Racing League and IndyCar Series, and I'm happy to haven't seen him in a while, but he's here tonight.
Great, good to see you. You know what it's like.
I do.
Yeah, I'd give you his name, but then he'd have to start signing autographs, and he doesn't want to do that. The star of the show is over there shaking and waving to his fans. Anyway.
Oh, so the Thermal Club is, I guess the best way to describe it, it's like a country club, except for instead of fairways, it's pavement. It's a private racetrack for members only, out in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
Not great, June through September, but pretty darn good October through May. And we just go out there and run our cars Wednesday through Sunday and have a lot of fun.
It's like some of the places, I think in California, we have airplanes.
Yeah.
It's the same thing, except you got cars, so it's small, it's not runways, it's racetrack.
Exactly, yeah. So they built houses with garages right on the track, and you store your cars there and just go out and run around.
So you think,
It's in Thermal, just outside of Palm Springs, and just a little bit, I guess a little bit north of the Salton Sea.
I remember the Salton Sea from my Navy days. I went out there. It was a mistake, but I went out there. They tried to sell me a piece of the sand.
Well, it's a bigger mistake now, you know. So.
The last time I was out there, the houses that people got sucked into buying were just sitting here with weeds growing out of the windows.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten any better, that's for sure.
Do you miss your business after 42 years, getting up, going to the office, telling people what to do and how to do it, and selling and all that? You miss it?
Yeah, for probably about 10 minutes. And
Oh.
No, I mean, yeah, I miss the people. I actually, a couple of the fellows that work for me still work for me in the racing team, so that's good. I think I'm busier now than when I ran the company.
Yeah, well, you have a guy on your team that I know and think very highly of. He's an outstanding race driver. He was in IndyCar for a short period of time, and he started a business that was hugely successful. He's now living in the lap of luxury in Denmark. I said, what are you doing over here? He said, raising a family. Oh, that's a good idea. That's Anders Krohn.
Yeah,
And,
great guy.
And when you get a chance, harass him, because you'll be back, he said, in the end of summer or middle of summer, I want to get him on the program. He did broadcasting, as you probably remember. He was really great behind the microphone. I thought did a great job. Now, how did you corral him?
Yeah, super fortunate how that worked out. Of course, ultimately, you know, he's friends with Stefan, but it didn't start that way. I don't know if you know the story about how those two guys met.
A little bit.
Yeah, they literally met on the racetrack, and they ran into each other a couple of times. And I guess the second time was Stefan's fault, and he actually went over and apologized to Anders, and they became friends before they slugged it out. So that's how they met. And then Stefan, when all this came together, Stefan asked Anders if he wanted to join us, and so gosh, I guess that first morning when we showed up here 3 years ago, that was the first time I met Anders in the credential office, and we just hit it off.
He's a great guy.
He is a great guy.
And he had a company called Coforce.
Right.
And extremely successful. I don't know if he sold it. I really don't know what he did with it, but.
So he sold his half to Johnny Baker, who still runs it to this day.
Oh, yeah.
And we still use Coforce for all of our promotional stuff.
Well, that's good. See, he's sitting at home today having a cocktail, or tonight having an iced tea and making money.
Not a bad way to go.
No. You also run sports cars.
We did, yeah. We ran some IMSA stuff last year, the endurance races. Interestingly enough, Katherine Legge was co-driver of Stefan's last year, and now she's going to be running in the Indy 500 with Ray Hall Letterman.
How did you hook up with Dennis Reinbold, who I think is one of the good guys in the sport?
Perseverance. Perseverance. We're super lucky to have the relationship with Dennis, but it was born of hard knocks. Running with Andretti as our 6 car wasn't ideal, and then we were the 33rd entrant at the very last minute last year with AJ Foyt. And, I think we just built up some credibility, and I think Stefan showed him what he could do. And his brother Justin, who's, now deceased, also ran with Dennis and Brett, so they knew him, and just all came together.
Yeah, Dennis, I think he's one of the longest, one of the longest running IndyCar teams. Started in the IRL. I think he's close to the longest running. Been here for 20 some odd years, 28 years.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I think it's 20. This is the 23rd year, I think.
Yeah, and he's been around, and it's interesting because he runs other series that most people don't know about.
Oh yeah.
He runs the E series. He runs off the road stuff. He runs around the world actually, but he has a crew all the time. Even for the IndyCar, he has a crew. It's always there, ready to go.
Great bunch of guys too.
Yeah.
I just met him for the first time yesterday. Wonderful people. But yeah, you're right. He runs Rallycross.
Yeah.
Or Nitro Series, I guess, is what he runs.
Now it's called the Nitro Series.
Right.
Yeah, he's into motorsports. Fortunately, he's been in it probably 40 years, but he didn't sell it. You saw the light at the end of the tunnel when bye-bye. It's time to go racing full time. You and your wife are into this thing full heart. I've sat and talked to the two of you a bit, and this isn't a joke. You're in here to win.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, clearly the underdog. If you're all our betting types, I think you can get some pretty good odds on Stefan. But little known fact, I guess, he actually led the race with 7 laps to go in 2017 and missed the fuel window and had to come in and pit and ended up finishing 15th. But he knows how to run at the front, and the Dreyer Reinbold cars are good cars. We were fast in the April test, 6 quick. So, yeah, we're optimistic.
How do you think, as the owner of a team, or owner of a team, yeah, and you get a driver that drives once a year in Indy cars? Now, I was talking one day to Ari Leindike, and I said, could you do that? He said, no. I'd have to run 2 or 3 races. At the time, we used to run at Phoenix. Well, NASCAR made that track no good anymore. Because when you set the car up at Phoenix, it translated here pretty much, strangely enough. He said, but I couldn't go and just do the 500. I'd have to have more races. How does Stefan do it?
You know, it's a testament to his spirit, his drive, and to his ability. I mean, it amazes me. He climbed in that car in the April test, and I mean, he had to run the rookie orientation again, so they progressed through. But he ran 2:25.9 100 laps into it. So yeah, I mean, he's a good driver. I really don't know how he does it.
I don't either, but he comes from good blood. His brother Justin, who I have had on the program a number of times, is a super guy and a super good driver.
Yep.
And it's funny how that happens. It's stuff like that. It kind of runs in the family. My next guest is from a family of racing people, and you're going to find out how it just seems to grow in the family. So you think your kids being raised and around this sport will say, Dad, can we get a go-kart?
The grandkids now, yeah. Our kids are fully grown.
Oh, are they?
But yeah, we have a 9-year-old granddaughter that loves to drive the go-karts.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I know, it's trouble.
Uh-oh.
Our 5-year-old grandson, not so much, but our granddaughter, she's pretty good.
Yeah, well, that's what this young lady's all about, getting females involved in the sport in one way or another. So
Yeah.
we'll find out what she's doing.
An outstanding racing pedigree over there in that family, that's for sure.
Oh, you're
So,
not kidding.
An honor to meet you.
You think you said you think you may have an announcement about the 24 season before the end of May?
So what we're working on is for the 25 season.
Oh, 25, okay.
Yeah, new team and 2 cars, but a lot of experience in racing. So we've got a meeting next week and trying to put it together. So hopefully what we'll do is come back and run for Dennis again in 24 and then put something together full season 2025.
Will you abandon poor Dennis?
Well, no. In fact, we've tried to talk Dennis into running more races, but you know, he knows where his slot is, and he's staying in that groove. So can't blame him. I mean, they do a heck of a job at Indy, and why not?
Yeah, but he could join you.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. Nothing's out of the question. We're not going to quit trying, that's for sure. We'd love to run with those guys. They're really wonderful people.
Do you see this year particularly has been an engine problem? I mean, getting an extra engine to get the 34th car was like pulling teeth from a baby who didn't have any. Do you see in 25 that that's going to be solved? Are they telling you they'll have another manufacturer join the series?
Well, as you know, we've been hearing about that for a while now.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's really sure. It would be most welcome if there was another engine manufacturer, because
no question.
You're right. There's 17 Chevys and 17 Hondas, and you know, that's it.
You're right, that's it.
Yeah.
And the strange thing is, as you probably remember, although you were busy making medical apparel, at one time Honda supplied all 33 cars.
I do remember that, yeah.
Now what's the problem with only 17? Come on, because they're not a giveaway program.
No, it's not a giveaway program for sure. Those motors are expensive on the lease.
Oh, well, are you anticipating sticking with Mr. Wilson as a driver in 25?
Absolutely. I wouldn't have it any other way.
All right, now listen, I know a couple guys, I'm a little old yet, but I know a couple guys that could be, audition for your second seat.
I love that, absolutely.
Now, I've lost weight, I can probably get in. At the time when I worked for a race team, I couldn't get in the car.
You know what I found? Getting in isn't the problem, it's getting back out again. Yeah, that's always my issue.
Yeah, that's right, I had trouble, so. Anyway, well listen, I think it's interesting how you've evolved into this position. Obviously, you understand business. I mean, and to me, that's numero uno. You've got to understand. This is a sport for the people that buy a ticket, but for a team owner, it's a business.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Unless you just want to write big checks.
Well, yeah, I'm sure you probably could, but you don't want to. Why should you? There's ways.
Well, there's a limit to everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. At some point in time, you said, geez, I'm starting to run a little short.
The fun part, really, though, is getting all the people together and exposing a lot of people to racing that otherwise probably wouldn't.
Right.
And that's what we've been able to do. So that's really fun. That's the part that I enjoy, is the fans and showing them a new experience and what it's all about.
Well, I think when you bring some of your sponsor people in, they'll be surprised, as I was when I got here in 1964. I thought they just drove the cars off a trailer, put them on a track, and off they went. A week and a half after they arrived and the car was put back together, I went, there's more to this than you think. And you get to see what goes on behind and how do they get to 245 miles an hour at the end of a straight. Hours and hours of crews working in the garage.
It's amazing, yeah, just all the body work and the wind tunnel and all the stuff they do just to smooth it all out to get a couple extra hundreds. But I think the most amazing part for us was walking into that 2.5 mile facility and going, wow, it was unbelievable how big that place is. And they always do the comparisons of 10 NCAA football fields will fit inside of it, but you don't really realize it until you walk in those gates and see it's just a phenomenal facility, and it gives me chills every time I walk in there, and I just love it.
I've been coming here from 64, and I drive by the track and I go, ooh, it's the Speedway.
Yeah.
People don't realize what it is until they come, and I've had a number of our group that's come for the first time and they're still here 25, 30 years later, because there's something about this place that just grabs you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's what keeps us coming back.
The biggest single-day sporting event in the world, the Indianapolis 500, and you will be a starter this year, no doubt.
We hope. There's 34 cars, so somebody's going home, but we hope it's not us.
Yeah, for sure. Well, we wish you nothing but the best. I thank you for the time. I hope people will say, now we know who Mr. Cusick is, so I'm glad you had the time to come over here.
Well, it's very kind of you to have us on the show. We appreciate it, and if any of y'all are going out to the track anytime in the next 2 weeks, come by and see us. We're in B1's, our garage, and love to give you a tour and introduce you to Stefan and show you the car and anything else we can do. So, very nice to meet everybody. Thanks for being here. And thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here as well.
My pleasure.
And
Thanks, guys.
I have decided that I will tell you that the former vice president of marketing is Mike Ringham. I didn't want to mention his name because everybody wanted to get an autograph, so there's a little break when I was all right. My next guest is somebody I think you will find very interesting. I had her uncle as a guest here a couple weeks ago, and he is nothing short of spectacular. Let me move this over a little bit closer to you for now. She has come from Ireland. She has spent 10 years with the Irish ladies field hockey team. They won the silver medal in 2019 in Europe and qualified for the Olympics. Excuse me, and she's an Olympian from the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. She has now started a program to introduce young ladies into the sport of motorsports. There's not just driving, there's not just mechanics, there's PR, there's photography, there's all kinds of things to do. She's here in town and has got a phenomenal response to their program, so it's going to grow here. Please welcome Nicci Daly.
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, shout, just pretend you're yelling at me. You grew up around motorsports. Besides your uncle Derek, there was others in your family who were involved in motorsports.
Yeah, I grew up in that small little fishing island off the east coast of America called Ireland, and my dad was a successful racing driver, so Derek's brother, in Ireland, and so I grew up from basically the day I was born. I was being pushed around at the local track called Mondello Park. So I grew up there, and all I remember is just seeing racing cars and wishing that one day I could get in behind the wheel of one of them. but that wasn't to be. I didn't actually get to race myself as much as I would have loved to. But I went down the engineering route and studied mechanical engineering, and then did motorsport engineering, and then ended up in Indianapolis working for an IndyCar team called Juncos Racing as a data engineer.
Now, prior to that, how did you get into playing field hockey? I mean, that's a rugged sport. I've never played it, obviously. But our high school had a girls' field hockey team, and they were limping around all the time. That's a tough sport. How did you get into that?
Well, I kind of fell into that, to be honest. I was one of these kids that was just loved all sorts of sports, and I threw my hand at everything and anything. And I played our national sport at home, which is Gaelic football, which is sort of soccer but in the air. That's sort of the best way I can describe it. And I loved playing that. And then when I went to secondary school or high school here, they had field hockey. And at the start I was quite stubborn to the idea, because I was like, no, Gaelic football is my sport, this is what I do. And then I started to play it, and I realised it's actually such a challenge. It was a really difficult sport because you can only use one side of the stick, and you're trying to control this tiny little white plastic ball and do everything with just one side of this tiny little hook. So I was like, okay, this is a challenge. I'm going to have to keep playing this now till I figure it out. And that's what kept me in it. It was just one of those games that every single time you stood on the pitch, it was a new challenge. And I was like, I liked that sort of, that challenge.
And it had to be exciting in the European Championships to win the silver medal.
Yeah, well, it's actually the World Cup. We won a silver medal.
I'm sorry, your World Cup, yeah.
And as hockey is a small sport in Ireland because we have two national sports with Gaelic football and camogie, and then soccer is obviously the next big sport, and rugby. So hockey's quite small, and the amount of people that play it is relatively small. But in terms of world hockey, there's a lot of professional teams out there. So for us to get to a World Cup final was history being made, and the whole country literally stopped at home, and they all turned on the TV to watch the Irish women's hockey team in the World Cup final, which was incredible because we really just put hockey on the map back home in Ireland, which was great to see and great to be part of.
And Derek tells me that there's not many people in the country that don't know who you are.
Well, like I said, it's a small little island. It's about the size of Indiana, so yeah, the World Cup and the Olympics was something that really, I suppose, helped our sport grow an awful lot, and now people do know who we are, which is fantastic because it means that young girls see us and they want to be like us, and they go out and they start playing hockey.
Now, that being said you went to engineering school and worked your way. I have a feeling, and I read this, that when you looked around the classroom, you were the only female there.
Yeah. And it was easy for me to know what I wanted to do because I was surrounded by it. I had that exposure from a young age with my family. But also when I went into that environment, I thought, oh God, I'm the only one here. Like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why I'm a girl, why do I like this so much? And so, it was the same when I came to work for Juncos. I was the only female engineer. And that was only not too long ago in 2016. But the experience I had was what was stuck with me because it was so positive, and I loved getting to travel all over America, new racetrack every weekend, and I loved telling people that my office was in the pit lane and there was cars going 200 miles an hour past me, but I was also aware that I had that exposure and I knew that what the sport involved. But there was plenty of girls, especially back home in Ireland, that didn't know anything about racing and didn't have that same exposure. And I just wanted to come back there, use my experience, my journey, my story, and to be able to share that with the next generation and give them an opportunity to see what it's like to work in racing and to basically open up all the different avenues that are involved in it and the career opportunities.
Now, I understand that your efforts over there have been very successful. Mm-hmm. You've had a lot of young ladies get involved, come and say, wow, there is a place for me, I can get into it. But to get to where you were able to start that and become an engineer, it's my understanding you spent 5 years, 40 hours a week studying to get there. It wasn't a thing you just take a test and off you go. A lot of work.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was never one of these straight A students. I hated school, to be honest. I used to just go to play hockey because I didn't realize until I fell into engineering that the way that I learn is more about doing, and this experiential learning was so much more impactful for me. that by the time I got to engineering, it was all hands-on, and I was making things and doing things in college, that I realized, oh, I'm not actually stupid. I can learn, but I just have to learn in a different way. And again, that's what we're trying to do with Sim for STEM, the program we're running here for girls, is to give that experiential learning. So putting them into activities that simulate what it's like to be an engineer, you know, build a data logger, wire up a temperature sensor, and then look at the data that comes off it, exactly like the data engineers do in the Indy 500. So it's like, you know, giving them that experience without sort of like, you know, beating into them all the theory and all the bits of information they probably don't really need.
You know, if you'd have tried this 10 or 15 years ago, people would have told you you're crazy. But girls aren't dumb. Give them the exposure and the will to want to learn. You'd be surprised. I think a lot of people would be surprised what happens. I know the head of Firestone Racing is a female. The race engineer, Lisa Boggs, and the racing engineer, I think, is still Kara Adams.
Yeah.
A female in charge of that, and when you want to know anything about the tires and what's going on, she's the one to tell you, and she knows. So, and I've seen a couple of tire changers are females on some of the teams, on the regular teams. So the opportunities are there, and you're exposing girls to the fact you can do this.
Yeah, I mean, you know, we had just shy of 200 girls over 4 days here in Indy between Dallara and IMS, putting them into those roles, you know, into different activities that simulate either being the driver or the engineer or the mechanic, and giving them, you know, that understanding of what's involved in it. Now tomorrow we're taking back sort of the most interested, the most enthusiastic, and those that are most motivated about wanting to continue on with a career in motorsports. We're bringing them back to the track tomorrow to meet and greet with Lisa Boggs and Kara Adams and different females in all different roles. You know, there's team managers there, there's PR and communications people, and so we're allowing these girls to not only see it, experience it, but now have the, you know, the inspiration to achieve it. You know, so it's just about putting the full picture together and putting them into, you know, the action and getting to see it for themselves.
Are you going to introduce them to Susie Elliott?
Yeah.
Are you? That's, boy, I'll tell you what, she makes that place tick. A lot of people don't realize, you see something going on, you say, oh, isn't that nice? Well, behind it is Susie Elliott.
Yeah.
She's a hard worker and has been there going on her 19th year.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is, because I thought she was only 22 to start with. So, what do you plan to do? Are you here to work with any teams, or are you here on this program, and when it's over at the end of May, you're going back to Ireland?
Yeah. So at the end of the month, I'll obviously stay for the race. I think it would be a bit bad if I didn't go and support my cousin.
Yeah.
and then I head back to Ireland after that, and who knows what's going to happen after that? We'll see.
What do you mean? Ricardo doesn't want you back on his?
Oh, he does. Yeah, I don't think he can afford me though.
Oh, jeez. Oh, really? Okay. Well, I won't tell him you said that.
Yeah, it's okay. I've already told him.
I'm sure you have. I'm sure you have. You know, it's kind of interesting, the exposure you've had, and to have gone ahead and done something where you're the only one there doing it, and looking around saying, what's wrong here? I'm the only one that uses the ladies' room in this whole operation. But did you have any feedback from any of the other guys that were in the same, like, what are you doing here?
I think, honestly, it was a perception that I thought they had. So when I walked in the door, I felt they looked at me as if to say, who's she and what's she doing here? But they didn't. They actually just accepted me as, I'm here to be a data engineer. And, you know, in the beginning it was a bit like, this is weird, we've never had a female engineer, but it wasn't that they didn't trust me or they didn't, you know, respect me for being the engineer. And then I think when they realized I could drink more beer than them, they were like, oh, right, okay, she can stay. And then, like, you know, after that, it was very much like we stayed friends. And we, like, to this day, I came back to Indy last November and went to the wedding of one of the guys that I worked with. So,
this is my next guest who is barging in here.
By the way, I am barging in, but I need to ask you, as an engineer in a race car, you know, a lot of us old birds, we you know, they used to sort of use a wheel hammer to get the front end adjusted. Explain to us, give us an example of how minor we tweak these race cars nowadays as an engineer, because we hear we just barely missed the setup and that changes your whole day. Give us an example of that, would you?
Well,
thanks, Don.
Well, whenever they would make, you know, camber changes or ride height changes. I mean, you're talking about a millimeter. Okay, so they move the dial like literally this much, and that makes a huge impact. You make camber changes by half a degree. You know, it's not going from 3.5 degrees of camber to 16. It's like, it's so small that you wonder how it has such an impact on the car, but it does. So like the changes are not, there's not huge variations in it all the time. There's just tiny changes one way or the other. And you know, as they say, race engineering is like a black art, because you could have one setup at one track one year and you go back and put the same setup on and the car's completely different. So it's just about fine tuning that all the time, and you know.
When you watch a race and they come in for a pit stop and they'll change the tires and they'll reach up and make a turn the wing. They look and they make a change in the wing. What you don't realize, one turn only moves that much.
Yeah, yeah.
It really, and the other thing I find interesting is you get a guy, and I've seen this happen when I worked on a crew. One driver would take the car out and say, this thing's going to hit the wall just as sure as I'm sitting here. I can't drive it. Another driver get in and said, this is the best thing I've ever been in.
Yeah.
It's amazing the different feel by different drivers of exactly the same car.
Yeah, no, you see it all the time. I mean, I've even heard Connor talk about it, how different teammates he's had are like, you know, one driver likes it really loose. He likes to feel it moving around a lot more, whereas he likes it secured a lot more in the rear. You know, he gets more confidence from the car that way, whereas others like it to move around because they feel like they can, you know, they can move with it.
Hopefully.
But yeah, hopefully. But what do I know? I've never raced.
Yeah, but the odd thing is, the race team I worked for, our team owner was a former driver for 30 years. And the car would come into pit area and they had all this computer nonsense. He'd go out and he'd measure the temperature in the tires. Then he'd go up on the pit box and say to the driver, how's the car? And if the driver told them what the tires did, they were fine. Then they could adjust it accordingly. But if the driver told them what he didn't see, now they got a problem.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how much you can tell from the heat on the tires what the car's doing. I didn't realize that until I started hanging around. I thought you drove the car off a trailer, went out to the pit area, and off you went. First time I was there, a week and a half after the car got there, then it went on the track because it was all back together again.
Well, now they have TPMS systems which are embedded into the tires, so they see live information happening from the inside, the center, and the outside of the tire, the pressures and the temperatures, and how they change literally from the straightaway to the braking zone, and how the temperature changes in that moment.
And they can adjust the temperature or the pressure on the tires when they make the change, going on what they've seen. It's amazing what they can find in these cars, and if everything is done right, generally I think you look at the start to finish, and I don't know that this will be much different this year, but from the pole to the 33rd car is usually maybe a half a second, 3/4 of a second. In some of the shorter tracks and road courses, it's less than that.
Yeah, it's really competitive this year. It's great. It's great to see it, because what I love about IndyCar is that you have a different winner every week, and just because one team is strong one week doesn't necessarily mean that team's going to be strong the next week, and it just keeps it exciting and keeps fans engaged, and yeah, it's great.
And of course, I've had your cousin here a number of times, and he's got a huge following.
Yeah.
And hopefully he will
win.
get a good finish where he's going. Because he, like you, was born and raised at this place.
He has, yeah. No, he's been looking strong the last year or two, particularly last year. So, obviously every year it doesn't matter whether he's looking strong or not. We want him to win. And
of course.
Yeah, it would be nice to be here if this year is his year to see it.
I have a feeling if he wins on the 28th, you might not be home on the 30th.
No, we'll still be on a party somewhere.
Well, I thank you for your time. I'm very impressed with what you have accomplished being an Olympian. You don't very often come to Autosport and talk to an Olympian. And I think that's congratulations to you on that. And wish you nothing but the best on going forward with your introducing young ladies to the entire field of motorsports. It's not engineers, it's not tire changers, it's PR, it's design, it's everything. And of course, the good thing about it is the kids you're doing, what, 8 to 12 or whatever it is?
They're more like, middle school to high school.
They know more about a computer than I'll ever know.
I know, me too at this stage.
When I have a problem with my computer, there's an 8-year-old down the street, I call him, and he can fix it. So what's the matter with, can't you do it? No, sir, that's why you're here. Well, thank you for coming here, thank you for your time, and good luck with your continued education.
Thank you. Thank you for
schooling.
having me, and thanks everyone for being here. Welcome to Daly.
Nicci Daly. My next two guests. Uh-oh.
I have another one at 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Will you get
I'm
a?
gonna get back to Indy by 8, but we're gonna try.
Well, you won't get a standing. You won't get a standing ovation there like you will here.
That's true. That's right. I have to pay the bills. What
Oh, there you go.
Thank you, everybody.
Don Cusick. My next guests are two listen to that. He's already taken over everything so far, except I'm gonna blow the wind out of his sail. The gentleman coming has been a friend of mine for some 30 years. The table's too dirty for him right now, and he's leaving. Well, all right, so much for that idea. Oh, that's what he needs, yeah, just what we need.
I need a lot more of this.
He has been a friend of mine. I embarrass him by saying that in public. He and I have been friends for better than 30 years. When I came to Indianapolis, I saw a talk show, and I thought to myself, I can do better than that. So I had met Rodger somewhere, probably in a bar, but I'm not sure. And I called him up and said, if I start a program, you want to come and be a host with me? He said, you'll never do it. I said, that wasn't my question. My question is, if I do, will you do it? No.
You're just like my wife.
You'll never do it. So the third day I called him up and I said, are you ready? He said, why? I said, are you done pointing?
I'm just saying hello to people.
Oh, good. You can say hello to people 45 minutes from now when we're done. Anyway, I called him up and said, you ready to go? And that's what started Autosport in Indianapolis. He's been a friend of mine ever since. And I will tell you for a fact, in his own mind, he's an absolute legend. Please welcome Rodger Ward Jr.
Hello.
Here comes the next speech.
I do. I have a question. I have another question for Nicci.
Well, you talk to her when you're done.
Okay. Well, you know what I asked Don K. Very specifically if he would allow me to introduce my brother. And I don't know how many of you have ever strapped one of them race cars on and charged down into the corner with a bunch of other race drivers. And I've had that opportunity a very, very limited number of times, and I was never worth a crap. But my little brother, in fact, if it wasn't, if we had the millions of dollars to sponsor him, I think he would have had an excellent career at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. He's a brave shithead. He beats me even in those handicap carts that I go back and forth to the racetrack on. He even beats me in those. And I am so proud to introduce my little brother. He was a former race driver, did pretty well in midgets a few years, badass in a go-kart, my brother Rick Ward. Hello.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks, brother.
Yeah, man, yeah.
I want to add, since Rodger went over it, there is a yacht club in Broad Ripple. The former commander of the boat club is sitting, or the yacht club is sitting right here. Rick was the commander. Commodore,
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Don. It's a Commodore of the White River Yacht Club. Yes.
That's all right, Commodore, commander, same thing. Starts with
You're
a C.
right. Same thing.
But now he's got a fishing boat in his backyard. He lives on the river, so doesn't need that big stuff.
So does anybody know where Quartzsite, Arizona is? Quartzsite is about 25 miles from the Colorado River, and they have a yacht club. And I spent $50 to join the Quartzsite Yacht Club so that I could come back and show my yacht club card at the White River Yacht Club. The Quartzsite Yacht Club has got house trailers in the back in the desert named after ships, after boats. So that's the extent of their yacht club. And I pulled my card out and they didn't accept it.
Gee, I wonder why.
All right, Rick, since Flop Chops here has been carrying on, was the results of your dad's success is what put you in a car thinking you could do that as well?
Well, obviously, our dad was always my hero growing up. He retired 2 years after I was born, so I never really got to see him drive a race car competitively. I got to see him run some legend cars. Excuse me. Some vintage cars a couple of times, but I never really got to see him drive competitively. So I always wanted to do that, and I never really knew how to get started. And I met a couple of guys, Craig Johnson and Gary Lynn, who are very dear friends of mine, who got me started in go-karts. I was a little bit older than most kids these days get started in go-karts when they're 8 or 10 years old. I think I was 25. So I didn't really get a chance to grow up driving cars, but I loved it. I had some success. And then when I got old enough and had a couple of kids, race cars went away.
Amazing how that happens, isn't it? You have kids and
Well, when you're driving out of your own pocket,
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to expense diapers versus race car tires.
you know, to this day, and I've asked this year again several of the drivers that drove in your dad's era, and I said, without any provocation, who was the toughest driver you drove against? And without hesitation, Rodger Ward. But they said he was clean. He was tough, but he was a clean driver. If you got by him, it was by luck and he made a mistake. Otherwise, you play hell getting past him. He was one of the best drivers in the history of the sport.
One of my dear friends, David Olson, who's no longer with us, went to a Q&A with AJ Foyt, and he asked who was the best driver he ever ran against. And AJ's quote was, "I caught him at the end of his career, but Rodger Ward was no tougher on dirt than Rodger Ward." So it makes me very proud that he's still remembered today, even though it's been over 60 years since his last win and almost 60 years since he retired. So very proud to have him.
And when he was coming here annually, he would always be asked, even by young kids, for his autograph. And I said to him one day, "Are you surprised?" He said, "Are you kidding? I'm surprised that the older people remember me." I said, "You've got to be kidding. One of the all-time best." Rodger, is it tough? Because I say it when I introduce you, that you're Rodger. I could say you're just Rodger Ward, and they'd say, "Oh, it's a guy who's got a store down the street." Rodger Ward Jr., does that put any extra pressure on you being Rodger Jr. and having been around when your dad did win twice?
Well, I guess you could say it put a lot of pressure on me. I was really too dumb to know that I had any pressure on me. I was too busy chasing, as I told you before, chasing women and drinking this whiskey and having the time of my life. And I think the pressure I put, I wrecked every car my dad had. I wrecked the Avani, the Thunderbird, the Chevrolet. I just was totally off the air, man. I think when I went in the Air Force, he went, "Phew, boy, am I glad he's gone." But anyway, I can only say, and I think Rick would follow me up on this, that my entire life has changed as a result of our dad's success at the Speedway. And I make sure when I write the Speedway, it's a capital T and a capital S, because this is the Speedway, and the Speedway, and my jobs, my opportunities, my success. I called a customer one time on the phone, and I said, "Hi, my name is Rodger Ward. I'm with Forward Electronics." I pronounced it Forward Electronics. But anyway, I'm with Forward Electronics, blah, blah, blah. And the guy says, "Well, I'm Jim Rathman." Well, this shows you that he's not just a race fan. He's a race fan with a specific knowledge of one of the toughest competed races ever, the 1960 race, when Rathman won. So, that guy became one of my best customers. And in fact, we have
He thought you were BSing, wouldn't he?
He probably did, but anyway, we have 28 seats in the third turn, and still, I'd say 18 of those tickets are occupied by my friends that I made because of this guy, Jerry Foster, with Cherry Electrical Products. But anyway, yeah, everything, my life has completely been enhanced by being Rodger Jr., and I know that Rick's didn't quite have the same advantages I did, but I know that, hell, he's gotten to drive cars on old-timey day, whatever, the antique race cars and stuff.
I've been lucky enough to drive A couple of Dad's cars over the years at Speedway and at different racetracks, Phoenix and Fontana, the 1966 Lola that he retired in, and a few years back I was able to drive the 1963 Watson Roadster at the Speedway, which was a real treat, except I forgot about the keeper and I had to hold the thing in gear. It had been so long since I drove a car like that. I forgot, why is it popping out of gear? So I literally drove the Speedway with one hand on the gear shift, holding it in high gear, and the other one on the steering wheel, because every time I backed off, it popped into neutral. I forgot about that little button on the transmission down there.
Well, I want to mention his whining and dining and carrying on. He finally saw the light, apparently, on a sober day. He ran into June, and they've been together, what, I think 38 years?
In a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Legally married for 38 years. And if you don't think that was a job,
That old business about being married is a tough struggle and you got to stick it out. We were talking about that the other day, and I says, Moonbeam, I call her Moonbeam. I says, has it been hard being married to me? She says, it's the easiest thing I've ever done. Well, she's made it so easy for me. It's the easiest thing for me, too. I love you, dear.
Boy, she's a good liar.
what you got to understand is she does most of the housework, most of the shopping, most of the cooking. All he does is, where do you want to take the motor home? And he goes.
She's in charge. That makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely. 2 thumbs up.
Well, I feel like I need to give a shout out to my lovely wife, Ann, over here, 17 years
In a row.
in a row.
None of your kids want to get in the car?
I had some complications growing my kids that they were not allowed to drive a car when they were younger.
Oh, good idea. Did they play golf or anything?
No, I'm very proud of my kids. They work very hard, but no, neither one of them decided. No, neither one of them got into race cars. So
Were they Commodores or anything at any time?
no, they're still pretty young.
Oh, okay.
You see, the whole thing about being a race driver is we see the guy show up at the racetrack. In my day, the guy showed up at the racetrack.
And my day.
And your day, and most of your guys' day. The guy showed up and he carried his helmet bag. Maybe even some fine babe from the night before was carrying it. And they showed up, and that was the whole product. That was the whole. Who wouldn't want to be a race driver, But it's kind of like owning a restaurant, you know what I mean? We don't see the guy there at 8 o'clock in the morning counting the heads of lettuce, Nowadays, these guys, I mean, the amount of work, the amount of physical fitness, the amount of dedication that it takes to really be in a race. Bobby Unser was one of the first guys to ever work out in the racetrack, and he had a seat and on a frame with a steering wheel tied to a shock absorber. You got whoever saw that thing in the garage area. And I mean, there was a guy that actually worked out steering. Other guys started, heck, I remember when guys had bungee cords tied to under their arms so their heads wouldn't fly over. Nowadays this is part of their physical fitness. But of course their heads are not allowed to move much, but like our guys used to. But the physical fitness that these guys have to go 200 miles an hour, amazing.
Would you like to do it?
Be a race driver?
Yeah.
I want the part about the girl carrying my helmet. And the other, But no, well, yeah, I'd love to. I drove some go-karts and had a great time doing it. It's a lot of fun, and there's nothing that can please you any better than leading a race or passing a guy. There's a feeling there that can't be expressed. Amen?
Amen.
Yeah.
There's nothing like being in the lead of a race, or passing for the lead, or just passing a guy that's in front of you. When you get out there and you have all that all the people, and you know that everybody out there has worked as hard as you have to get a race car going. Usually I did a lot of the work myself, and some of the guys I competed against had guys that worked for them. I had a couple of guys that helped me out, but you know, when you get out there and you've worked all week long on the race car yourself, and you've gotten everything you can, you've done everything you can to get the race car going right, and then you end up on top, it's not a better feeling in the world.
The work, that's the part that I didn't like.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work when you own a race car.
I'm reading a book. I don't know if any of you have read it. I just got it and started it. It's called Blue Monday, or Black Monday.
Oh, yeah.
In the beginning of it, there's a story about when, and I think it was 61 or 62, something like that, when Jimmy Clark was here. Parnelli Jones was leading the race. Jimmy Clark was in second. And the drivers' meeting before the race, they said that if you are leaking any product, we will black flag you. And there was a couple cars that did leak, and they were black flagged. But Parnelli was leaking oil, and your dad was behind him as well. And Eddie Sachs was in second, and he couldn't get around him because of the oil on the track. And he said his goggles were, and his what little shirt, he had a hell of a time with it. He couldn't handle it. And after the race, he said that USAC was inefficient, that they should have black flagged him, because that's what they said. The story was, or the rumor or whatever was, that they didn't want a foreigner to win the race, because Jackie Stewart was in second. After the race, Eddie Sachs went up to Parnelli and made a comment. It might have been at the White Way, for all I know. I can't remember.
It was at the Holiday Inn. Parnelli punched him.
Yeah, well, let me finish the story. They get into an argument, and Parnelli says, call me a liar again, and I'll punch you in the face. So Eddie Sachs called him a liar. Bam! Down went Eddie Sachs. The next day at the victory banquet, your dad comes up to get his prize, and he looks out and he says, I don't see Eddie Sachs here. He must be at home taking boxing lessons. I thought that was funny. But anyway, you know, you guys and everybody in here knows the greatest sporting event in the world is the Indianapolis 500. And if anybody doesn't believe that, you know, when you can attract 350, 400,000 people to come for one day, now instead of spending 6 hours like originally, you're down here for 2.5, 3 hours, and love every second of it. What else can you say? It is the best there is. And your dad, at the time he drove, was a very serious and dangerous time. A lot of guys lost their lives at the time because you stood out and you had a little cardboard helmet on. It was tough, and your dad won it twice and could have won it 3 times. I had he and
Should have won it 4.
yeah, could possibly.
Could have won it 5.
But he retired.
Well, if you want to hear my story, man, we did win in '59. In '60, he killed the engine in the pits, and then he still went back out and caught Rathman, and he jacked. You know, in those days they had a 1/4 inch, a 3/8 drive ratchet wrench up there, and you put a little more weight in the right front. So he jacked too much weight in it and wore the right front out, or he would have stayed ahead of Rathman and won in '60. In '61, if we'd have known that Foyt was going to have to stop and Sachs was going to have to stop, I mean, Pop let him pass both cars go by because he couldn't pass them, but he could race with them. Oh, he would have stayed with them, and they would have stopped, and he would right on up in there. In '64, in '63, we didn't have a Chinaman's chance. Did I say Chinaman?
No, you didn't.
Sorry, checking out. Anyway, we didn't have a chance. In '64, if he doesn't push the fuel mixture all the way to fuel rich and run it out of gas, we stopped 5 times. Coming out of the back straightaway, going into one, Parnelli and Foyt both passed my Pop, and he pulled out and had to lift to keep from running over the back of him. He was that much faster. So we could have had a string of wins, but Parnelli should have won the '62 race. And everybody's got their own story, but I like my version the best.
Well, I had your dad and Jim Rathman on the program one night, back some time ago, obviously. And your dad was talking about how he had damaged his tire. He pulled in, changed it, and caught him again. And he said if Jim would have been a gentleman, he'd have let me pass because he knew I was faster. But he wouldn't let me by.
Well, those two guys used to needle it up pretty good. I miss those guys. You know, these young race drivers we have now, I mean, let's face it, they're physically fit. They're, of course, mostly spoiled rich kids. But, I mean, you know, in our day, the guy had showed up with a helmet bag, you know, and that's about it. But, I mean, these kids they're great race drivers, and I love watching them. But I miss the personalities of guys like Bill Cheeseburg and Norm Hall and Sachs. Sachs used to
Clown
come.
Prince.
Say that?
The Clown Prince.
Oh, yeah.
Sachs.
And Eddie Sachs used to come around our gas station, and he was the weirdest guy, man. He'd wear those big Russian fur hats and all, and he'd come around and people would come into the gas station to get gas. They'd end up inside. We'd have 15, 20 guys in the front office of the gas station, Sachs telling stories. You know, those kinds of personalities, I tell you what, that guy Roman Grosjean, I've got about 6 text messages in my phone right now where we're trying to be in touch with his PR lady, and this guy can't squeeze in 20 minutes for us between now and the race. Now, I have a word for that. It rhymes with bull and ends with something else. But I mean, you know, the PR guy used to be the guy that could drink the most. Now they're good-looking babes, you know what I mean? Wearing khaki pants.
By the way, I think Nicci would like to comment on race drivers today are rich. I wasn't aware that Connor was rich, but
I didn't say all of them, but a lot of them. Connor Daly, he earned his way.
by the way, is there anybody here that likes to play pickleball? No. Okay. Well, if this comes out in time on Carb Day, Tom Sneva wants to get a group of drivers, particularly, but team members to play pickleball on Carb Day. So if you're interested, get a hold of them. Fran, are you ready?
Yeah, okay, I'll pass.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Tom Sneva wants to play. Anyway, you know, the sport has changed. It used to be at the end of the day when the track shut down, everybody went to White Way. You could see all the drivers there. I've gone to short tracks where at the end of a race, guys are in the parking lot beating the hell out of each other. The next morning, they're in the parking lot trading parts so they can go out and race against each other the same day, the next night, that night. It's amazing. The sports, you can't do that. A lot of sponsors won't allow their drivers to run short tracks anymore. And a lot of the drivers have never driven them, so that's another problem. It's a different sport, but I still find it very exciting. The speeds that they go, the cars are quite safe. You don't want to see anybody hurt or seriously hurt. But it's a different sport, and I still enjoy it. I still love it. I'm still here. And Mike Ringham goes most all the races around the country, so it's got to be something exciting to drag him from Atlanta.
But I'm still here.
Yeah, you're still here, still going. Who do you think can pull it off this year, Rick?
I don't know. It's Alex Boulle seems like he's due. Whether or not that's the case or not, there's a lot of guys that certainly have a chance. I'd like to see somebody do get it this year.
Yeah, we always want new winners. Always want a new winner. The other day on Facebook, I saw where somebody wrote anybody but Elio. I kind of like Elio Castroneves. I wouldn't mind seeing the guy with 5 rings. What the hell?
Yeah,
I'd like to see one with 2 wins.
Who?
I'd like to see one with 2 wins.
There you go.
His initials are T and K.
TK, one of my favorites.
The one I want to see with 2 wins is Scott Dixon. He had his chance last year, and he missed it.
I know for that.
With a 1 mile an hour speed limit break and going into pit area, it cost him the race. So the interesting thing about the sport today is, and I made the mistake, as I've said it numerous times when I had Mark Miles on the last time, I said, at any given weekend, there's 8 or 9 guys that can win. He said, I beg your pardon, it's any time 15, 17, 18 guys can win on any given Sunday. Yeah. So it's fun. You don't know who's going to win, but the other thing is today, there's more strategy involved. There's Pelot made the smart move. They started on the primary tires, what nobody else did.
Yeah.
And that gave them an advantage. And the fuel strategy. I mean, there's a lot plays into winning. Luck is being one of them, but strategy. And you can't win the race if you're not running at the end, so that's the other part of it.
Well, that race at Birmingham, that was definitely a Penske win. That was a team win because of the strategy. I mean, let's face it, man, Grosjean, man, he was off and gone until, eventually, I guess because of fuel, the two-stop strategy. You would think two-stop strategy would be better, but obviously the three-stop was the winner.
Yeah, and he finished the race with, 130 seconds of time, and he couldn't push the button?
Yeah.
So,
That's a driver mistake, in my opinion.
yeah, I would suspect, but they tell him, be careful, save fuel and all that. Well, I think it's going to be an exciting race. I'm sure most all of you, except for two people I sitting, one with a checkered shirt on and her honey behind her, will not be at the race, but I'm sure everybody else here will be. I want to thank you for coming. We will be here next week, next Tuesday. My first scheduled guest is a guy I'm sure you've probably heard of. His name is Mike Hull. He will be here, and I'm working on a couple others to join him. So hopefully you'll stop by. We'll be here at Green Street Pub and Eatery on Green Street in Brownsburg. Till next time, I want to thank Don Cusick and his wife for being here. I want to thank Nicci Lauda for stopping by and telling us what she's doing. And of course, the legend and his brother, Rodger Ward and Rick Ward. I want to thank them both all for being here. Till next time, Don K saying see you then.